Let me start with something I see pretty consistently when I sit down with business owners. Most owners have a number in their head for what their business is worth. And usually that number isn't random. It's based on something, what they've heard, what others have sold for, or just what feels right after years of building it. And I get that because when you've built something over time, you develop a sense of what it's worth. But here's the issue: when you actually look at the business the way a buyer would, not just the revenue, but the risk, the structure, how dependent it is on you, that number is often off. And not by a little, by enough to materially change what that business can actually do for you. So, this conversation is really for a specific type of owner, someone who's built something of real value and is starting to think a little more intentionally about the future. Not necessarily selling tomorrow, but asking questions like, what is this actually worth? What happens if I step away? What do I want this business to ultimately provide for me and my family? If you've had those thoughts, even a little, this is for you. I was sitting down with a business owner not long ago. Good business, solid revenue, long track record. And at one point, he said, I think we're worth about $10 million. And to be fair, on the surface, it looked like it could be. But when we stepped back and looked at it from a buyer's perspective, not just what he saw, but what someone else would evaluate, it wasn't even close. And what stood out to me wasn't that he was wrong, it's that no one had ever shown him how to think about it differently. Here's where this becomes real and a little uncomfortable. Roughly 70 to 80% of businesses that go to market never sell, and the ones that do, many of them sell for less than the owner expected. At the same time, most business owners have the majority of their net worth tied up in the business. So you've got this situation where your largest asset is also your least liquid and often the least clearly understood. And that disconnect usually doesn't show up until something forces the issue. So when people hear this, they assume this is about selling. It's not. This is about control, control over your timeline, your options, your outcome. Because whether you plan for it or not, that transition is going to happen. The real question is, do you shape that outcome or react to it? This is where the idea of the value gap comes in. There's what your business is worth today, and there's what it could be worth if it were operating at a higher level. More transferable, less dependent, better structured. That difference is the value gap. Now let's make that real. You might have a business worth $5 million today that could be worth 10 or 12. That difference is not theoretical. That's how buyers price risk. And here's the part most owners don't think about: that gap does not stay the same. It either widens or becomes harder to fix over time. Let me give you a real example. This comes from the CPA community, just to illustrate how this works. A manufacturing business doing about 30 million in revenue with roughly 2.4 million in EBITDA. From the outside, it looked like a strong business, but when you look deeper, the owner was heavily involved in key relationships. There was customer concentration, leadership depth wasn't fully developed, systems weren't fully documented. None of that is unusual. In fact, it's very common. But from a buyer's perspective, that's risk. And risk shows up in value. If you stepped away from your business for 90 days, what would actually break? If your largest customer left tomorrow, would it hurt or fundamentally change the business? If I asked you to show me how your business runs, could you? If you step back, is there leadership in place or does everything still run through you? When these areas are strong, something important happens. You don't just increase value, you increase flexibility. You can sell, you can transition, you can partner, or you can do nothing. And that's the key. You're choosing, not reacting. Most owners can see these gaps. That's not the issue. The issue is they don't act, not because they don't care, but because it feels unclear. time consuming, or disruptive. So they keep going. At that point, it becomes a decision. Do I stay where I am or build something stronger? Both are valid, but they lead to very different outcomes. And here's what I've seen happen: owners assume they'll deal with this later, and then something forces the decision. Timing, health, market conditions, and now they're working with whatever the business is at that moment. There is a structured way to do this: discover, prepare, decide, step by step. At some point, this becomes real, and that moment doesn't create the outcome, it reveals it. So here's really where this leaves you. If you're sitting there realizing you're not comfortable with what your business would deliver today, then the next step is simple. Let's get clarity. That's exactly what I help business owners do. Through a value gap assessment, we walk through where you are, what a buyer sees, what's impacting value, and what's possible, so you can make a clear decision about what to do next. You don't have to figure everything out today. You just need to know where you stand. You don't have to sell your business, but you should understand it, because that's what gives you control. My name is George Vieth. I work with business owners as part of a CPUT team to help them understand, grow, and transition the value of their business. The goal is simple: help you turn what you've built into something that actually supports your life, your family, and your future.